You're listening to the Jersey Guys Podcast, the show that talks about hard rock, heavy metal, AOR, and West Coast music. In-depth conversation and special guests are always on tap, so settle in and turn it up. Now, here are your hosts, Tom and Mark.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Jersey Guys Podcast. This is Mark Ballo, and I'm here with my co-host Tom Coyne, as always. Today we've got special guest Ronnie Mancuso from the band Beggars Thieves. Of course, Beggars Thieves was a band that's been around for a while now. Their debut album came out in 1990. They've released 4 albums since then, and they also have an EP to their credit. And Ronnie was a great interview. We had a lot of fun with this one. As we'll learn and as you'll see and hear, that Ronnie is just a man of many talents, many endeavors in his life, not just Beggars Thieves. So it was a real good conversation, and let's get right into it, and we hope you guys enjoy this one. Ronnie Mancuso from Beggars Thieves. Welcome, Ronnie. Thanks for joining us tonight.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
I figured I'd start with this, and everybody, I think our listeners, the type of music that we cover on our podcast, I think everybody's going to be familiar with Beggars Thieves. But can you talk a little bit about the early days of the band? How you met the other members and how the recording contract with Atlantic Records came about with the debut that came out in 1990?
Yeah, well, I was in Los Angeles originally, and I had seen Louie when I was like a young kid, 16 years old. He was in a band, Louie Merlino, the lead vocalist of Beggars Thieves, was in a band called Axis, which was Vinny Appice and Danny Johnson, and they had a record on RCA that.
Oh, Tom knows about that.
I have that record.
You know that record, right?
Yes, I do.
Who did? Andy Johns produced it. Great
Yes.
record. That's the record that got Vinny the Black Sabbath gig because they liked that record that he did. So when I first went to LA, summer of 79, 16 years old, it was all new wave and everybody had cut their hair, and except for Quiet Riot, which I saw at the Starwood, but it was a strange time. So Axis had made the record on RCA as a 3-piece, and then they were trying to readjust, so they added Louie into the band, and I saw them at the Starwood and the Whiskey a Go-Go and a bunch of different places, and I was a big fan of Louie's. So I was able to track him down and got him to start playing with me. And then he brought in Dana Strum, and we had a band that were playing all through the club circuit during that time. So I knew Louie from then. And then that fell apart, started working at Pasha. Me and Dana and the drummer started working as a house band at Pasha Music Studios, which is right around the time they had the Quiet Riot's big album. So it was an exciting time there. We were doing all sorts of records and projects, and we worked with an artist named Danny Spanos, who had a pretty big record at the time, Hot Cherie. So we toured with him. And during that time, Louie moved to New York. So I'd always stay close with Louie. And then at some point, I ended up going to New York, and he was doing jingles. So he introduced me to the Scott Shear, the gentleman that he works for. And I started writing jingles, and I thought, wait a minute, there's really good money in this. And so
well, that's a story we've heard a million times, and we've had guests on before, and everybody's kind of dabbled in that. And yeah, they say it's great money.
Especially back then, you get the SAG on air residual. So it was really nice. You could, have plenty of time to do other things. So I moved to New York, and then me and Louie put together Beggars Thieves, and it happened really quickly. We played like 5 or 6 shows, but also during that time, Louie was working with Desmond Child. It's when he did a bunch of projects with Desmond Child. So we wrote some songs with him, and then it was real fast. I think after 6 gigs, we had like 3 record deal offers. So.
And how did you settle on Atlantic?
It was the legacy, I think, more than anything. We sat with Amador again, and I thought, Zeppelin, Company, just all the things that he had done. And right or wrong, we chose Atlantic.
Now, how did you bring in, you had Bobby Borg on drums and Phil Soussan, of course, from Ozzy Osbourne's band and stuff. How did they come into the mix with the band?
Well, the demos that we did with Desmond were with Bobby Chenard on drums and Huey McDonald from Bon Jovi on bass.
Oh, okay.
And Bobby's a monster drummer. But we really wanted our own band.
We were talking about that before we went on the air. Bobby and
of course he played on the second Beggars and Thieves.
He
album.
played on the second Beggars and Thieves.
Chenard did, correct.
Yeah. And I was telling Mark, I said, this guy was so friggin' good. He was like an upper echelon drummer of that era, which says a lot into itself.
He had a feel that was just undeniable. It's just, I think he's one of the most sampled guys too. The original hip hop was Big Beat by Billy Squier, which he played on, and then Walk This Way were the original breaks that they started creation of hip hop. So he was deep and just had that studio thing too. I worked with him. He did Alice Cooper Trash. He did Share, Heart of Stone records that I worked on with Desmond. So he was a monster. But once again, he was a session guy, and we were trying to be a rock band of the era. So Bobby came in. I liked his energy. I thought he was a real solid player. And then we tried a bunch of bass players, and we were out in L.A., and Phil had it going on in all areas. He had the great legacy already from playing with Billy Idol and Ozzy. And he fit the part, and that's how we put the band together.
Now, you mentioned that the band only played about 6 shows before you got signed. Did you guys tour a lot or play a lot of shows after the album came out in the area? Because Tom and I are, big New York, New Jersey guys our whole lives. And I mean, I seem to remember the only show and Tom, we were talking about this before we started. The only time I remember seeing you guys play was a show at the Ritz opening for somebody, but I can't remember who.
We did, we didn't tour extensively, but we did a bunch of shows with Tesla. We played when they did the 5-man acoustical band,
maybe that was
opened those shows.
Yes.
Yeah, and we also did a bunch of shows with Dawkins, but I think it was Don Dawkins at the time, actually, because when he first did his first solo record, I believe.
Right. Oh, okay, and maybe it was that.
But we didn't go out and do we didn't do 10 months tour or anything like that. We would just do pockets of shows, different locations. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So,
where did the name Beggars and Thieves come from?
well, we had a song first, the song Beggars and Thieves, and we were looking for a band name. And Louie's girlfriend at the time was really good friends with Mick Rock, who's the fashion photographer. I mean, he did all the Queen stuff. And more interestingly, he's the gentleman from the Rolling Stones that was their publicist, Andrew Oldham. And Andrew Oldham is a gentleman that locked Keith and Mick in a room and said, write songs. I mean, he was the one that came up with, would your daughter want to marry a Rolling Stone? All that stuff, right? So he was a hugely influential guy. And him and Mick Rock, who I know you know Mick Rock's photos from Queen, all the Bohemian Rhapsody, all that.
Sure.
And then Iggy Pop stuff. And we're having dinner with them one night, and he said, name it Beggars and Thieves from the song title. There was a list of things that were there, and we liked the sound of it. And just getting that yes from Andrew was like, okay, we'll go in that direction.
Okay.
So the song came first, and then the name of the band came from the song.
Correct.
It was like the chicken and egg thing. We had to kind of get that out there.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
I think one of the biggest questions I've always wanted to ask you, even going as far back as when this album came out, what were some of your influences, yourself, Louie, with this band? Because you guys sounded like nobody else, and there were very few bands at that time that had a real identifiable sound. As many great bands as there were at the time, there was still a lot of bands that, like they culled from Zeppelin and Whitesnake, Rainbow, Sabbath. You guys had a very identifiable sound, kind of like a King's X or a Diving for Pearls. Bands of that time that really didn't sound like anybody else. Like, where would you identify as your sound and your inspirations, and where did the sound come from?
Let's see. The first Montrose album, David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust, something monumental albums in my career. Zeppelin, obviously. Aerosmith, Get Your Wings, Rocks, and Toys in the Attic. I think Louie was heavily influenced by Steve Marriott, Humble Pie, obviously Lou Gramm, those kind of Paul Rodgers, who's the god of all those type of singers. Everybody's influenced by Paul Rodgers. Plant. Cheap Trick was huge in my childhood, but I also liked funk, and I also liked funk and jazz and fusion when I was a kid. So I liked Sly Stone. I liked all sorts of music, anything that was really good, but it had to be soulful and funky and have a vibe to it. I was never into like classical metal. I mean, I love Deep Purple, but I was, soulful music was always important to me.
Well, that's interesting because you could hear a little bit of that, like in Billy Knows Better, Waiting for the Man. Like those songs had a little bit of that, like that offbeat bass and, vocal phrasing in them.
Well, like a lot of people that took from Zeppelin, they took the most bombastic parts of Zeppelin. Like obviously Whitesnake did that with and I like the funky Zeppelin. I like the Ocean and Diremaker. And, I like the, those type of tracks more. So I think I took a different type of Zeppelin, just like a lot of guitar players took from Hendrix, and then Eddie Van Halen took from Clapton. But you wouldn't really think of it right off the bat to think that his biggest influence was Clapton, but it was. So I didn't take from the bombastic aspects of that music. I took from the more subtle aspects.
The more tasty aspects of it, rather than the more like hard rock metal leanings of it.
Right. Yeah, more from the subtle stuff than the flashy stuff, I guess you'd say.
The song Your Love Is in Vain, it always reminded me of early 70s Stones. Would I be off on that?
No, I really love the Jimmy Miller era Stones, with Mick Taylor.
Me too. That's far and away the best era of the Stones.
That's
in my
just
opinion.
that was the best. I have to say, I just saw the Stones a couple months ago, and it just blew my mind how good Mick Jagger was at his age. It just was astonishing how good he was. What an inspiration for anybody that's getting older and feeling tired or whatever. Just go watch that guy. And Tyler too. I saw Tyler maybe a year and a half ago, right before COVID. I mean, since longer than that. And McCartney, those three I've seen them all in the last 5 years, shall we say, and they're very inspiring for anybody that's getting up in age. Just say, whoa, go see those guys.
The thing with the Stones is when Mick Taylor left, they lost all of that virtuoso guitar playing, which they never had before or never had after. And so it's kind of a niche in time, like that 69 to 75 period.
It is, and the way, and Ron Wood was actually really good. And I like him a lot, but he's like another Keith. You're absolutely correct. You had a more specifically guitar player with Mick Taylor, and it just really, they complemented each other more, I think.
Well, you know how Ron Wood got that gig because out of all the guys they auditioned, one of which was Jeff Beck, they felt that Ron Wood looked the most like a Rolling Stone, and that's how he got the gig.
That's true, and he still does.
And he still does.
Really good. Yeah, and he gets along great with Keith, and they, it works. So sometimes the chemistry of a band, I mean, some of the best bands individually you would think, but when you put the right pieces together, the sum is better, more important than the parts. You know what I mean? A lot of the best bands are that way. There's something about the way they play together or how their individual styles fit together,
My other question I wanted to ask you about the debut album, which I always thought of at the time too. You guys saved what I thought was the best track on the album for the last track, and you rarely see a band do. Usually, albums are like kind of like it's like a major league batting order, and as you start to get into 8, 9, and 10, it's the lesser.
Right.
But you saved the cleanup hitter for the last track on the album.
That was the first video, right?
Right. Whose idea was that? And were you guys that sure of yourselves?
I think that was Cliff Bernstein's idea. If I remember correctly, but it was like the statement, and it was like who we were. We always tried to end the albums with like a ballad or a statement kind of song. I think "Look What You Create," we did the same thing with that.
It's just a monster song, and I always thought of like it's at the very end, and you always hope that people listen to entire albums and don't get tired after the 7th or 8th track.
Well, I really believe in still do, although I think it's not relevant anymore. The idea of an album is a collection of songs, so that flow together nicely. So even when we did "We Are the Brokenhearted," there was a bunch of songs that were on the Firefest EP. There were some of the better songs, but they fit together. I made that album fit together. I like the idea of an album that you play all the way through, both sides, and then go back to the first side. I recently got a record player again, and Brent Fitz is a good friend of mine, plays with Slash, and he gave me Slash's new album. And the relationship I have with vinyl is completely different than an Apple Music playlist or a Spotify playlist. I have the relationship with Slash's new album like I did as a kid with an Aerosmith album, where I put it on, and then after you listen to both sides, I played the first side or my favorite side for like the next couple of weeks and just listen to that side and then turn it over. And after 4 or 5 songs, you got to take the needle off. You're looking at the album cover. So the whole visual experience of vinyl is it's a different experience, and I think a lot more rewarding. But the idea of albums, it seems like a lot of records in the last 20 years, it's like 8 or 9 tracks in, and then at the end of it, they put like 3 other songs that are failed attempts at singles or something. You know what I mean? Like now you got 15 songs. It's like, I don't want 15 songs. I want 10 songs that make sense together.
Well, that started with the advent of the CD, because they were able to put more material, and then it was a competition. I'm sure you do remember. It was like, somebody had 13 songs, and then somebody squeezed in 14, and then 15. Now all of a sudden you have really what's a double album squeezed into, one CD. It's very hard to digest 14 or 15 songs.
Yeah, I totally agree. And a lot of them sound like attempts at singles that didn't, so they just, instead of one complete thought. But all the albums I'm sure you did too, the albums we grew up, Who's Next? I forgot to put that in as far as my influences. That was huge influence of mine. Who's Next? Those kind of albums, you could play them all the way through. There's no reason to ever take the needle off the record.
But those albums also had their own their own personality, because you had the side 1 and you had the side 2, and you always had the one side that you favored a little bit more, and you lost that with the CD because it all just blended,
Yeah, and then now with playlists, it's like, I think Spotify and Apple Music, their normal setting is shuffle. It's like they don't want you to listen. It's hard. They make it inconvenient. You can listen to the album.
Yes, it's the complete opposite. Yeah, what we grew up on. There's no question about it.
Yeah, and it's not better or worse. It's just completely different. But to me, it's the weight of the music isn't the same as it was.
Well, yeah. Also, not to sound like a pair of old geezers talking about this,
which we are.
I'm 63. I go back, from the whole era of the 70s. But quite honestly, I think that we really had the ability to sit back and digest music much more than this generation. Everything is very immediate. Not only music and sports and news, everything is immediacy, where I think we grew up in an era where we still had patience.
That's true. Yeah, and that experience of getting a new record.
Oh my God!
I listening to? I think I was just listening to Todd Rundgren being interviewed by Rick Rubin. And he was saying when he got Revolver and locking the doors and putting the albums, getting the exact spot he wanted to sit in, and then putting on that record and listening to it.
No, I was that way too as a kid. I really was. I can still remember things. I remember things from my teenage years, all based on albums and music and concerts, and yeah, I get it. Believe me.
And now, who's going to listen to even a song without looking at their phone? It's just
that's what I'm saying, and it even spills down to us as older guys. I find that I have not the attention span that I used to, just because of the world that we live in.
Right, which is neither. It's just the world keeps progressing, technology keeps changing, and it becomes different. So everything now is a TikTok video, which can be really entertaining, and it could be lots of new kid musicians that are coming up. It's astonishing the quality of musicians that is popping up. Just so many young kids that can really play, and that's because they have access to all that information. But the way they succeed now, it's totally different than the way you learn. Like, yeah, somebody said, "Oh, you see that drummer, some female drummer? Oh, yeah, she's got the gig with whoever, or some bedroom guitar player." I saw a thing, it's a bedroom guitar player from Japan at the booth, the Ibanez booth at NAMM. And I expected some kid to come up and shred, and he played this most beautiful, quiet music with tapping, some weird techniques. There's a lot of great things going on. It's just different from our era, and I don't hear rock music having the weight that it had back then, or the way we experience is not the same.
No, I don't either, but I'm going to move on to the second album now. Now, there was quite a few years in between these two albums. Could you tell us what entailed between 90 to 97 from album 1 to 2?
Okay, so what happened was we were in New York and we're supposed to do Your Love's in Vain, and Cliff Bernstein had an idea for us to go down to New Orleans and make a video, and that would have been the next song. And then the way I remember it is the guitar player in Def Leppard passed away, and Q Prime was heavily distracted with all of that when that happened. And the energy at the record company kind of went down, and when we had our moment in time, because the first single, Beggars and Thieves, we had over 100 stations. So it was just about to cross over. We're at a pretty good place. And then, I'm sorry, I forgot his name. Who's the guitar player from Def Leppard that passed away?
Steve Clark.
Steve Clark passed away. They were heavily distracted, as they obviously had to be. And that sort of fell by the wayside. During that time, Bob Pfeiffer was an A&R guy who had really good success with Alice Cooper Trash. And he really wanted the band. He wanted the band from the beginning. So Q Prime, we made a decision to, instead of going back to Atlantic and moving on to Your Love's in Vain, to move over to Epic and make a second record with Bob. Thought it would be a much better circumstance for us over at Epic. But unfortunately, then Atlantic didn't want to let us go. So that whole process was like a year. I had moved back to LA. I remember it's right when I think the first Gulf War started. And I had a home in LA. So since we're going to be on Epic, I thought I'd go back there. And Phil was there. And we waited and waited and waited. And it's a very stressful time for me. But then we're released from Atlantic, and we were signed to Epic, another big, huge record deal, big money record deals back in that time, right? And so then we started, Bob Pfeiffer sent us up to write with Jim Vallance in Vancouver. And you know who Jim Vallance is, I know.
Yeah,
I'm sure you do.
Bryan Adams.
And Bryan Adams, Aerosmith, Scorpions, all this. And he was wonderful. I really enjoyed. He was definitely a good influence, and a mentor to me in production and all sorts of things. So we spent a bunch of time writing with him, and then we finally got it all together. And then we went up there. Paul Northfield was the engineer who had done the Rush moving pictures and those two big Rush records and Queensryche, a bunch of stuff. Wonderful engineer. But unfortunately, by the time we finished that record, it was Nirvana Party Overtime, you know? That's just
the famous story that so many bands went through.
You know, and I didn't get it because I loved Soundgarden, and I like that kind of music. I thought, you know, Motley Crue will make a great record, or somebody will, and I didn't understand that those things couldn't coexist at the same time.
Well, Motley Crue did make a great down-tuned, great down-tuned record with a different singer, and nobody liked it other than me.
Right. Well, Mick Mars likes it from what I've been
he
told.
does. Yeah, that's true. Mick Mars is very big on
And
it.
anything, it's a good record. Anything Bob Rock produces is amazing.
Oh, my God. It had one of the most incredible productions, that record. It shook the house.
I still think there's no better sounding records than Bob Rock's The Black Album and obviously Dr.
Yeah, he got a
Silver.
bottom end that very few guys got.
Still to this day, sonically, when Kickstart comes on the radio, even Sonic Temple, the Cult album.
That's another great sounding
obviously,
record. Yep.
Yeah, those sonically, those are the best sounding records, even to today, even by today's standards.
I agree.
But anyway, so by the time we finished the record in Vancouver, which is what you said, a year and a half, 2 years later, Epic was no longer. It was over. It was game over for everybody. You know that it was for everybody. I thought we're not a hair metal band. We're like a classic rock band. But there was no. At that point in time, you had to come in some sort of wave.
Yeah.
We were already in Metal Edge, and we were already in.
Yep.
You know, so even though we were first album, I remember a reviewer saying the only other person that played like me was the guitar player from Mother Love Bone, which was the guys from Pearl Jam. So I didn't see that. I didn't see us being that far off. It was so more cultural, I guess, than anything else. And then it just all of a sudden it didn't matter anymore. It was over. You know, for a long time, really. So, unfortunately, that's what happened to us. So, I was in LA at the time, and Louie was in LA, and I was able to retreat into writing music for Fox Sports and a lot of radio music and jingles and stuff like that, and continue to make a living in the music business, which is pretty good as it is, you know. And then MTM Records in Germany contacted us, and they wanted to put out Look What You Create, and they were able to negotiate points override or something with Epic, and that's how that record came out.
What were your feelings on that record? Because I really liked it a lot. I thought it was almost on par with the first one.
Yeah.
Did you guys have the same feeling about it?
I think sonically it's really good. I think song-wise there's a lot of good stuff on it. I don't think it's as cohesive as the first record.
Right, but it's close, I thought.
But it's really good. I like it a lot. I wish we would have been a little more tuned into the direction of what we're trying to do. But a lot of great songs, sonically, great playing, and sonically it's really good. Paul Northfield's a monster engineer. Sonics have always been really important to me, how a record sounded. And Bobby Chenard plays really well, you know, Red Rose Parade and some of these other, there's some monster drumming on it. So, there's really not a record that I'm embarrassed by, which is really important because as you get older, occasionally I'll put something on and say, I might have missed the mark a little bit here or there, but I never cringe, which I do when I listen to a lot of other things that people have done or I've done. You know what I mean? So I'm always proud of the Beggars material. It stands the test of time. It's good classic hard rock, you know. So
with its own sound, which is what I always liked about it. You guys sounded like nobody else. You had your own sound, and like I said before,
I appreciate that.
There were only a few bands in that era that really had that, and King's X was one of them. You guys,
King's X really did. I love King's X.
Right,
yeah.
And there was so many great bands, you know, Blue Murder, Badlands, all those type of bands, but there was all, you know, Rainbow and Zeppelin, Worship, and there's nothing wrong with that. I love that. But there was so many bands like that, and there were only a couple of bands that really separated themselves from the herd, and I always thought Beggars and Thieves were one of them.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's nice to know.
I remember it was funny. I when the album first came out, and I was trying to tell friends, and I was like, "This band, they're great," but I'm like, and they're like, "What do they sound like?" And I'm kind of like, I don't even know how to explain it, you know, like as far as the sound or who you can compare yourselves to. And it was like, I think one of the things I used to say back then, I'm like, think of like like a light version of like Badlands maybe, because I always compared Badlands with something you just said that was like a classic rock sound, you know, but they were kind of lumped in with that hair metal era, you know, and I'm like, I don't know how to even explain like Beggars and Thieves, you know, it's a lighter version, but it's classic rock in a way.
That's what we grew up with, were the sum of all those influences, you know. But Louie didn't have that whiny voice. He didn't have that kind of, you know, that style, that Vince Neil kind of.
No, he had a very different voice from everybody else, and your guitar style also was different.
And I was never a shredder. That was not where I came from. I was a Jeff Beck guy, you know, and David Gilmour, those are my.
No, you played for the song, which I grew again from the '60s and the '70s. I always preferred guitar players that played for the song. The shred thing is fun, and it does fit with some bands. But most of the stuff you go back, like you said, you like David Bowie. I mean, Mick Ronson was the epitome of that type of guitar player.
Oh, he was wonderful. I saw Randy Rhoads at the Starwood with Quiet Riot, and like, I don't know, 77. I'm not even sure when. I was 16 or 15. I was like, oh my God, he's wonderful. But he obviously was hugely influenced by Mick Ronson. That was his. He
even copied Mick Ronson's look. A lot of people don't even know that.
The look too, absolutely.
Yeah, you know, like people that aren't as old as I am, or go back and delve into this stuff as much as I did, don't realize how much he copied. Even the way he held his guitar, his stage movements, the way he dressed, the way he had his hair. I mean, obviously he had, you know, the real shredder type of chops too.
But he took that to another level. But you're right, that's where it came from. Just like Angus Young came from Paul Kossoff, which I didn't realize so much later.
Right, absolutely.
If you look at those early there's a free video of Isle of Wight or something, and the vibrato and the stance and the whole thing. Obviously, Angus took it to another level. But I think that happens with everybody. You know, I mean, everybody's got to start somewhere, and then they hopefully.
I mean, what better guys than Ronson and Kossoff to decide to copy yourself?
I know, right? It's usually the guys that play less inspire the guys that play more. And then
Yes.
the guys that, and then the guys that are inspired by the guys that play more aren't the guys you end up being classic because they
Right.
become too much, you know.
So on the third album, you guys stay with MTM. This time only 2 years goes by. What was the whole writing process, and where were you guys at that point?
Okay, at that point, I'm now in Vegas, and so I was in New York. When I was 16, I moved to LA. Then I moved to New York. Then I moved to LA. Then I moved back to New York one last time in the 90s, and that's when I worked for Raucous Records, which was who's the gentleman? I'll think of it in a second here. So I worked at Raucous Records, and I was producing bands for them. And James Murdoch, Rupert Murdoch's son.
Oh,
that's
okay.
what it was. Yeah, big. He's the head of News Corp now. He's a hugely powerful man. He was a young kid at this point. He put this label together, and so I was working with them, and I did Motor Baby and a band they had called Plastique. And they ended up becoming real successful at one point. But so my son was born, and I was still mostly doing Fox Sports music and making a living. And I realized I didn't have to be anywhere. So at that point, I could do it from anywhere. And so at that point, I said, I'm going to go back to Vegas because my grandparents are there, my family's there. I want them to enjoy my child. I ended up having my daughter when I was there. So I come back to Las Vegas in the early 2000s. And MTM, we had some leftover songs from Look What You Create, and I think we wrote 3 or 4 or 5 more, and we did that album really cheap, really, did it in my living room, I think, the other songs. So we had some leftover Jim Vallance songs that we had written with Jim Vallance, like Faster, or whatever it was, and so that record was thrown together really quickly, but there's a couple songs in that that I really still like a lot, In Between, I think, is one of the best lyrics I've ever written.
And you saved that for the last song on the album, too.
I don't remember. I don't even have a
It's the
copy
last
of
track on the album. I like that song, too. I thought this album, personally, was a little less accessible to me. I had a harder time getting into it overall. It didn't flow quite as well.
What happened is they sequenced that album, and when they put "Don't Call It Love," I think was the first track on that album. I never listened to it again because I didn't want that on there. It was like at that point in time, it was like if I'm going to do anything. So that's the most discombobulated of the bunch for sure.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Glad we agree.
Even though there's moments that I'm proud of.
No, there were a couple of really good songs on it. I just didn't think that it flowed.
And I had nothing to do with the sequencing of that album. In fact, I sent it to them in one way, and it came out. And like I said, once I heard that, I never listened to it again for 10 years because I was so frustrated by the process. But, such is the business. They were, somebody wanted to put it out. It was like, it's funny. There's one good story from that album. That was Louie and me were fighting at the time, and he was mad at me for something, and he wrote me this letter. And he's like, "You're not a friend of mine. You haven't been a long time. I'm done with you." And so I took that, I turned it into a lyric. And I said, "All right, Louie, we'll do this album, but you have to sing this song that you wrote." As a letter being mad at me, and that's the song done, which is actually a cool song. But
oh wow!
So that's all right, Louie. So he sang it, and we made up as we do, like brothers, But so yeah, that's the Gray album. I don't even have a copy of it. I need to get a copy of it. That's the only thing. That and the live album are not up on Apple Music or Spotify, and I want those to be, because at least everything that we've done is out there.
Right, you have the full package up.
Well, I was just saying that to Tom earlier. I said, I go back and I was kind of getting a little refresher course before the interview here tonight, and I said, the only album that's not up on Spotify is that album. Well, it probably makes sense what you said. I mean, about, you had probably a group of songs that were written for the prior album, and then, you wrote some others, and then you turn it over to the label, and they kind of sequence it and how they want to do it. And you're throwing songs maybe that were older songs together with newer written songs. And it's.
Yeah, it wasn't written as one project or one vision.
Well, that's what it kind of sounded like.
Too. And that's what it sounds like. So, yeah.
Right. And it also didn't have one of the most exotic front covers either.
No, it didn't. I still like the concept, though. I like the gray album. I like that being stuck in the middle somewhere between the black album and the white album.
Now we have a really big gap again in releases. Tell us a little bit about what led up to We Are the Brokenhearted and what went on before that.
Well, at that point, we were done. There was really no reason for us to continue. If I would have known things that I know now, maybe I would have attempted to go into the European market earlier. And but it felt to me like there was no audience for us. I didn't realize that there was some real love out there for us. And so I helped Louie. Louie was singing in Las Vegas and making a living as a singer. And we did he was doing different bands, Sin City Sinners, and he was able to do some things. And I was obviously still writing library music, still making pretty darn good living being a musician, which is hard to do as it is, right? So somewhere around 2009, a gentleman from Sicily, which me and Louie are both Sicilian, so Paolo Siciliano.
I'm half Sicilian.
So okay. So he contacts us, and he's like a big fan of the band, and he's like, we end up going to his house and overlooking the bay in Sicily. He's got Beggars Thieves posters, and he's like a really big fan of the band. So that was the impetus to start maybe doing something. And now at this point, Kevin Churko, who's still a huge metal producer, he does Five Finger Death Punch, Disturbed, In This Moment, Hell Yeah, did their last 2 records at my studio. He built a studio next door to me in the shopping center that my restaurant is in. I have a recording studio, and he took the space next door and built a recording studio. So I had all these things going on, and we had an opportunity to go. Initially, we played Firefest, just with me and Louie, and we played the party downstairs. We didn't play the actual event. But we went over to Nottingham, England. And I get over there, and I find out there's a lot of people who know who Beggars Thieves is. To me, I'm thinking, nobody gives a, I don't know if I can cuss on here, but
sure.
Nobody gives a fuck. It's like, who cares about us? And I get over there, and there's like guys coming up to me with singles I've never even seen, shaking. Oh, I love your. I'm like, really? Okay, cool. This is cool, And we played, and there was a lot of respect. And now there was a reason to do something. And I also had the means of production because, in the 80s or even into the 90s, to make a good sounding sonic album costs a lot of money. You can't. Nowadays, anybody in a laptop can make a record, and it'll sound pretty good too because they're not recording real drums or whatever it may be, So through the love of Paolo, he became kind of our manager, and he was able to negotiate us a deal with Frontiers, who obviously owns that type of music. And I felt like there was a reason, and at this point, I get re-inspired again. So I said to Louie, Louie was very busy and he was working a lot. I said, we've always been like Led Zeppelin, we just do it together. This time we're going to be like The Who. I'm going to write the songs. You're going to sing them. Are you cool with that? And he said, yeah, I'm cool with that. So I got out my acoustic guitar and I went to a trip to Newport. I wrote like 3 or 4 songs there. And I just concentrated on writing a bunch of songs that felt relevant to where I was at that point, And then we went about, I know what happened. Okay, so I was trying to figure out how to record the album, and Joan Jett and the Blackhearts happened to be coming through town. And Tommy Price and Enzo, who's the bass player and drummer, or were the bass player and drummer in Joan Jett and the Blackhearts, came over and we jammed one night. And I'm like, I got to use these guys. Especially Tommy's just a monster drummer, man. Since Bobby Chenard, he's the guy that can just has that swing. I can't describe what it is, but he played on Rebel Yell and tons of records. He's a well-respected New York session drummer.
Yeah, well, Tom and I were just talking about that before we started.
He's been in everything. He's been in a lot of bands.
He's a monster, man. The thing is, it's so hard. There's so many great drummers, but in the studio, there's not that many. Les Warner's great from the Cult, who I've worked with a lot, that have that swing. And it's not always, you don't always need that, but for the kind of music I like, you have to have a certain type of swing. With Chenard, Les Warner, Tommy,
Jeff Porcaro.
Other guys.
Jeff Porcaro made a.
Paul Porcaro. Oh, he can play a shuffle like nobody,
right.
Man. Right? Yeah, and so but it's a very unique thing. It's very subtle. You can't describe what it was. So I figured out a way. I said, okay, I want to do this record with these guys, even though it's going to cost me a part of my budget, a good part of my budget, because I got to fly them out and put them up. Kevin Churko was wonderful, and he helped me get everything set up, mic'd everything for me. He was working on an Ozzy album at the time. I needed a bunch of preamps, so he said, pay my son to move them over there. I'm not using them anyway. So he came in my room and helped me get the drum sound and get the whole band set up. And we spent like a month, and we recorded all the songs plus a bunch more for We Are the Brokenhearted. And then I just spent a lot of time in making that record. And then at the end, Kevin mixed it, and I'm real proud of that record. I think it's a good record.
Yeah, no, I know you've always said it, and I've read in interviews that it kind of is your favorite Beggars and Thieves album, right?
I don't know. It's hard to say because for this moment in time, it is. I'm proud of that album. I think obviously the first record resonates with probably the most people, but I'm proud of that album. So yeah.
No, it's a great album. I wanted to ask you about a particular song on that, and Tom and I were talking about this before we went on the air. The song "Wash Away." Can you tell us anything about that? It's a song that just every time I hear it, it gets my attention.
Have you seen the lyric video I just put out on that?
No.
I'll send it to you. I should have sent it to you before. I just put a lyric video on that.
Oh wow.
It's a song that resonates with me too. It's just a song I wrote on acoustic guitar, and I don't know what any of my songs are about. It's better when you kind of don't, so everybody can have their own interpretation. I've had people come up to me and say, "Oh, I really like that this song's about this," but it's about letting go, and it's just a song I'm really proud of the way it came out. I think it's a really nice piece of work. It's one of my favorite pieces of work I've ever done. Yeah.
I wanna take you away down to the where the angels play, and we'll get inside and let the tide wash us away. Hey girl, the bells are ringing downtown, the devils are singing our praise of the sinner's pain. I see long, cold, dark days of winter.
It might be the best of all four albums from song 1 to song 10. There were 10 songs on this because there was not anything that was even remotely filler on it. Not that there necessarily was on the first album, but I didn't think there was even a letdown on this album. It was just 10 really well-crafted, super catchy. I remember the first time I got this album when it first came out, the first time I listened to it through, every song right off the bat stuck with me. It wasn't one of those things you had to listen to, 4 or 5 times to start to get.
Well, thank you very much. That means a lot, man. Thank you. Yeah, I was, but the process of that is, that's why the Firefest EP, like Stone Alone's a really strong song. There's Little Love Survives a really strong song, but I really wanted the album to flow. So I took those songs off just so that they would all flow together. The sequencing was hugely important on that album, so that hopefully I would have the effect that it had on you.
Yeah, no, it whatever you were setting out to do, you accomplished it.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. I appreciate it because it's really hard to do. You got to be the tempos and the keys, and all that's so important if you're going to have a continuous listening experience. You know what I mean? You could put one song after the other song and go, now I want to. You put a record on and all of a sudden I got to take it off. What? That feeling when they don't flow together nicely. And that's not like the albums we grew up loving. That's not like Who's Next or Houses of the Holy or whatever, or Ziggy Stardust. Every song flows into the next.
Right, because there was a lot of time and attention placed in that as opposed to, decades after where you'd listen to an album, be 2 or 3 songs in, and then there was some clunker that just threw the whole record off, and you had to stay with it for it to hope for it to come back again.
Exactly. The other thing about now is you can't even do that because a lot of times the space between the songs is really important also. So I crossfade certain songs so they go into the next song. So I remember cutting them. So if you went on the CD to track 3, you'd hear the tag of track 2 because there's no other way around that. And then you think after the third song, I need 2 seconds here. I need to pause. You know, you see what I'm saying? It's like editing a movie or something. You know, you want it to all flow, and you can't do that anymore because no matter what, you're gonna have 2 seconds between each song. You know, it's just if you're doing on a playlist. Well, I appreciate that you guys got that because I put a lot of time and energy into that record, and I'm proud of it.
Well, that was 2011. And we're now in 2022. Anything maybe on the horizon for Beggars and Thieves?
There could be. There was talk about maybe M3 or Monsters of Rock Cruise or something because
oh yeah, that would be perfect.
We have all the original members and we don't play a lot, so sometimes they like to put something that hasn't been out there, you know, saturating the clubs all year long. You know. So that's a possibility. You never know. And we could record more if there's a reason to, or a song for a movie or something. I mean, I'll be tied to the hip with Louie for the rest of my life, obviously. He's still in town, still got a good instrument. So who knows? Anything's possible.
Well, let's talk about other things that you do. You know, Beggars and Thieves isn't just the only thing you do. You're a man, as I said in the beginning, of many endeavors. Talk a little bit, if you can, about the restaurant that you own, the Bootlegger Italian Bistro out in Las Vegas. Understand it's something that's been a staple on the Vegas scene for many years. How was that you got involved with that? It's a family thing, I think.
Well, my grandparents came to Vegas in '39, and they had successful restaurants, and my grandmother passed away in 2018 at 102. So we're now the 4th generation. My son, if you go in the Bootlegger tonight, you'll see my son at the front desk. He's my partner in that, along with my mother, who's still very active and doing well. And we have on the shopping center, and in that shopping center is also the recording studios, which is the original hideout that Kevin Chirko built, where he recorded Disturbed and Five Finger Death Punch and all those records that I mentioned earlier. Lots of big records were recorded there.
What's the name of the studio?
It was called the Hideout. After he did, it's now Studio 77. So what happened is after Kevin did Disturbed, Sounds of Silence was such a massive hit that he went and bought a freestanding building with 3 SSL rooms, and that's where he works out of now. But we're still very good friends. But he built a room there. So I have 2 recording studios. My room, the office, is also the drum room, and then next door to it is 2 control rooms and 2 vocal booths. A really nice setup. And my son manages and runs that. And then we also have a club in there that seats 250 standing, but like 150, 180 sitting. And it's just put a beautiful Myers PA in there. I have right now I have a band called Santa Fe and the Fat City Horns. I'm not in the band, but it's a wonderful band here in Vegas. 14 guys that play funk, soul music. They play every Monday night. And I just put the new PA in there. So I'm really busy managing all that, you know, keeping all that going. And it's really cool because it's multi-generational. You know, all the rock guys come in all the time. I mean, everybody that comes through town from any of the residencies, they're all coming to the restaurant, most of those people. Eddie Trunk's been really supportive and helpful for me. Recently, I became really good friends with Stephen Piercy. Me and him are working on some things, which is really cool. I really enjoy him and like him. And so I got a lot going on. So I've got the live music venue and the restaurant and the recording studios. It's all at the same location at the end of the strip, South Strip. And keeps me busy,
yeah.
You know?
No, it sounds like it for sure. Are you still writing songs now actively? Is that something you do on a regular basis?
You know, you can never... That's my true love, man. Still playing music, playing guitar and writing songs. So, yeah, I always do that. Try to find the right outlets. I've been working the last couple of years with a singer named Mandy Lyon.
Oh, sure. World War III, yeah.
World War III. And I have an album with him that I'm really proud of. I've never done something this heavy, but it's really good. It's kind of orchestrated and like Zeppelin-y. And I don't know. It's got its own sound too. It's kind of gothy, but it's still really heavy. So that's a record that I'm proud of, that I want to put out. And
is he still singing in the same vein of when he did the World War III stuff?
Yeah, he's still a screamer, but he can hit high notes and Dio-esque kind of singing, more Dio-esque. And his screams and stuff are pretty remarkable. I think he's found it's not so. I think it's the best thing he's ever done. So I'm excited about that. Yeah, I'll send you guys some tracks. And we did like a couple of videos and like turn him into comic book hero, which it looks really cool. So that's been fun. I have to have that outlet, you know. So I'm doing that, and I'm helping Stephen Piercy on doing a legacy project right now. So I've been sorting through so many cool things, and I've got like great live interactions with him and Warren when they're writing Round and Round and a bunch of cool stuff. So I've been helping him do that, and yeah. So you know, I'm still in the game to a certain extent because you know, and I'm gonna actually play. I want to play at the restaurant because we have live entertainment there too. I really miss playing. If I don't play guitar, it becomes, even physically, it's bad for me. I need to play. It's the whole thing of being grounded to the earth and having a guitar in your hands is pretty special, and that's never going to end, you know? Yeah.
Well, you talking about playing live, didn't you go out with Red Dragon Cartel and play bass?
I did. So after we did Beggars, Jake came around, and I saw him, and I really wanted to like help him out and do something with him. And he gave me like 6 hard drives of material, and I kind of sorted through it. Sometimes it was simple as like a 2-bar guitar pattern that I liked or something, you know, or sometimes there were more structured songs or whatever. And so I wrote the lyrics and melodies, or most of them. And we put a band together, which was Red Dragon Cartel. And at the time we wanted people that weren't like, you didn't want to do an obvious thing like get the singer from this band and the drummer from this band. You know what I mean? We wanted to try to do something fresh. So we did that. And then 2014, I went to the record came out. I think it's a really good record. Did quite well, really. It was top 40 record, and it did really well. And then we toured 7 weeks in America, 7 weeks in Europe, which is really fun for me, and like 2 or 3 weeks in Japan. So that was a fun experience. I like that record. I think it's good.
So how was that kind of getting back out on the road again and being a touring musician?
America was rough because it was clubs and stuff, but I thought, you know what? I remember that you put a band on the road for like a month or so, and they play every night, then they become a real band, you know? So I said, it's, you know, even if it's going to be rough and we're not, you know, staying in the Four Seasons hotels, it'll be okay, because at the end of it, we'll be a good band. And we were. Then Europe was an absolute joy because we were treated well by promoters, and I was getting to see places I hadn't been to, Prague and Finland and all through Spain and Italy. So I had a great time. But I'm glad I don't have to do that for a living, if that makes any sense.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah.
It's a tough life. If you're in your 20s, it's a tough life. No less, you know, if you're in your 50s or 60s, it's.
Well, I don't know how they do it, because I have a lot of friends that are weekend warriors, you know, and they're going out, and they'll be in the studio Thursday, and they'll leave Friday morning early and come back Sunday or Monday morning. They've been on 5 different airplanes, lobby calls at 4 a.m, 90-mile drives to an Indian casino. It's tough, man. You know, but that's how they make their living, and God bless them. And they're, you know, anybody that's out there doing that, good for them. It's still fun, but I'm glad I don't have to do it.
Sure. Fun for somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, or if you're young or you've never experienced that, but to do that in my mid-50s, to go to Europe and play with Jake, it was really fun. I had a really good time on that. It was really fun, but for that moment in time.
I mean, you see bands like UFO are still out there, Saxon, you know, some of the British bands especially. The touring is relentless, and the average age of the guys in the band is like 70, you know, and I don't know how they do it, because I get one bad night's sleep and it screws me up for a whole week.
I know, me too. I couldn't do it at this point. I really couldn't. But you know what? That's how they that's what they do. And some of them do a great job at it. You know, some of them are start to break down. We've seen that a lot. I'm not going to mention any names, but we've all seen, but then we see Mick Jagger at 80 kill it. So it depends on how much you want to fight, man. When you get older, it really comes down to like what's in you.
Absolutely. No matter what you do, you're right. It's if you still have the passion for it. It doesn't have to be music. It could be exercise. Could be a lot of different things. If you still want to push through it, that's the difference maker.
Absolutely, that's totally correct. Good observation. Absolutely. But those guys, that's the living. That's how they make their living. And the ones that had a few hits, they can keep playing until they can. It's like Frankie Valli in the Force. You can go till you're 90. I saw Tony Bennett at 90 and he killed it. So
right.
And then you also reach the point where you got to say maybe it's time to stop too if you're not willing to do whatever Mick Jagger does. I guarantee you Mick Jagger does a lot of stuff to be Mick Jagger as far as stem cells and nutritionists and all sorts of physical therapists and
Yeah, I mean all you have to do is look at him, and I mean he's got the same body that he had when he was 25.
I saw Steel Wheels tour. He was every bit as good this time. He didn't dodge one vocal, didn't dodge. Tyler, too, a few years ago, I don't know after now things that are going on with him, but Tyler, I went with Eddie Trunk to their residency right before COVID. And Tyler and Joe Perry were so good, it was astonishing how good they were. It really was. It's just astonishing how good they were. I couldn't believe, I was looking to see, what are they doing? No, they were singing. He was singing every part of it. It was all Screams and Dream On, the whole thing.
I saw them on their first tour. I saw them open for Black Sabbath at the Garden in 1974 on the first album.
How were they then?
I didn't know them, to be honest with you. The first album had come out, and I bought the album after that, so they were good. But that's how far back that I liked them. And I've had, different periods of time. I liked them all through the 70s, and, some of the more commercial stuff wasn't really my bag. But I've always had a lot of respect for those guys. And, Tyler still has periods where he's incredibly good, and then you see periods of time where, there's a little bit of ring wear there. But
well, I saw them in the 70s. I think it was the Rocks tour in Vegas, and it wasn't good. But that was the heroin period. The full-on heroin, that thing. I remember seeing Stars like 3 weeks before, and I thought they were way better. But I was a kid. But they certainly got it together in the 80s, and then they obviously went super commercial. But there's still a lot of great stuff, dude.
Absolutely.
And but they're monsters. But once again, they're seasoned professionals that do it on the highest level, and they take really good care of themselves. And I think that's the key. People that can continue to do that, God bless them, let them go as long as they can. And then the others, sometimes people stay too long. It's like a fighter, and maybe it's time for them to throw in the towel. No one's going to do this forever. But it's sure inspiring. Even Paul McCartney, I saw, was wonderful.
He just came through New Jersey. Yeah, a couple of months ago.
Did you see him?
I didn't. No, I know he's through New Jersey. Did the stadium about a month ago.
Yeah, he's incredible.
Great band,
absolutely incredible. I mean, he also looks, you don't even think of 80 years old. You don't even think of 60 years old. He looks like he's like 45, 50 when he's on the stage.
Just think Paul McCartney. It's the same essence.
Yes. He still has the same presence, and voice still sounds terrific, and great.
Well, Ronnie, hey, Tom and I appreciate the time tonight. Hope you enjoyed talking to us, and because we enjoyed talking to you, that's for sure.
I really enjoyed spending this time with both of you. I hope you come out to Las Vegas and I can feed you some spaghetti. And
well, my girlfriend's been trying to get me to go out there, so there's a chance. My girlfriend's a big fan of it. I've never been there, actually.
Me either, actually. So yeah, it's one of the places I always wanted to go.
You got to come out. I will hook you up big time. That's what I do now. So
awesome.
I'd love to meet you both in person, and thank you for sharing this time with me. It was really fun for me. I enjoyed it.
No, and thank you for giving us your time. It was a great interview, and I very much enjoyed it and appreciate it.
Well, keep in touch, guys, and I'm going to send you. I'll get your email afterwards. I'll send you the Wash Away lyric video. What I'm going to do is once a month, I'm going to release a lyric video of music that I've done, mostly Beggars, but whatever I feel, once a month, just to get some more stuff out there. I had such a positive response to the Wash Away video. I just got a simple lyric video. It's not anything crazy or anything, but really nice to see that song touched people's hearts. And so I'm going to continue to do that. And I'll definitely keep sending them to you. And if any new music, I'll send you some of the Mandy Lion stuff too. I think you'll like it.
Excellent. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear that.
All right. Well, everybody, Ronnie Mancuso, Beggars and Thieves, amongst other things. Thank you for your time tonight.
Pleasure. You guys have a great night.
You too.
Take
Thank
care,
you.
Ronnie. Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Dance the streets in the city of angels, 10 years of my life, with hopes and dreams that I know would come true. Well, just a matter of time. I hitched a ride out of a railway station, nothing left but my pride. Watch the city lights fading away, yeah. Thank God I got out alive. And yet at times I feel its grip, trying to drag me back again. So hard to believe, run around the world just like beggars and thieves. So hard to believe, beggars and thieves. I found myself in the city of mirrors, empty pockets, hard times.